On the distant planet of Thryxos, where the skies were painted in hues of violet and gold, and the surface was dotted with cities that gleamed like silver stars, the royal family lived in a sprawling palace built into the side of a mountain. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers, and the sounds of distant music echoed through the halls. Among the palace's many servants was a young man named Zane, a human who had been captured years ago by Thryxian raiders. He had been sold to the palace as an indentured servant, one of the few humans on the planet. Zane had been taught to speak the Thryxian language and had learned their customs, though he was often treated as little more than a tool, a piece of furniture in the royal palace. He had grown accustomed to his role, working as a personal attendant to the princess, one of the most beautiful and powerful beings in the galaxy, Princess Eryna. Princess Eryna was stunning, with flowing silver hair and eyes that seemed to shimmer like the twin moons of her planet. Her skin glowed a faint shade of green, a feature that marked her as royalty in Thryxian culture. She was known for her intelligence, grace, and commanding presence, as well as her sharp wit and cold demeanor. Zane had always kept his distance from her, knowing better than to think she would ever look at him as anything more than a servant. He moved quietly in her presence, his thoughts always focused on his duties, never allowing himself to dream of a different life, one where he was not bound by chains of servitude. But Princess Eryna was not blind to the young man's quiet strength. At first, she had noticed him only in passing, observing how he worked diligently, never speaking unless spoken to. She had dismissed him as just another servant, another face in the crowd of palace workers. However, as time went on, she began to see something in Zane that stirred her curiosity. It was during a grand feast, the kind that only royalty could host, that everything changed. The hall was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft hum of lively conversation. Zane was in the background, his duties simple: fetching drinks, cleaning up, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. He moved with a practiced grace, never drawing attention to himself. It was then that the princess, looking out over the room, noticed him. He was bending to pick up a glass that had slipped from the table, his movements fluid, almost effortless. For a moment, Eryna's gaze lingered on him, and something in her chest tightened. She shook the feeling off, dismissing it as nothing more than the long hours of the evening catching up with her. Later that night, as the guests began to leave, the princess found herself alone in the garden, staring up at the stars. The weight of her royal duties always pressed heavily on her, and she needed a moment of peace. Zane, who had been cleaning up the hall, appeared quietly beside her, offering a glass of water. "Princess," he said softly, bowing his head as he handed her the glass. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" Eryna took the glass, her eyes meeting his for the first time, truly meeting his. There was something in his gaze, respect, yes, but also something deeper. It was as if he saw her not as a princess, but as a person who might want to be understood beyond her title. "You've been working hard tonight, Zane," Eryna said, her voice softer than usual. "I appreciate your service." Zane nodded, though his heart skipped a beat at her words. "It is my honor, princess." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Eryna's thoughts were clouded, and she found herself oddly drawn to this human. There was something about his quiet dignity, the way he carried himself with such grace despite his status. She had never thought of him this way before, but now, for the first time, she wondered if there was more to him than the servant she had always seen. Over the next few weeks, Princess Eryna began to notice Zane in a new light. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, observing the way he interacted with others, the way he carried out his duties with precision and calm. He had a certain quiet intelligence that intrigued her, a wisdom in his eyes that suggested he had seen more of the universe than his humble position suggested. It wasn't long before she found herself seeking out excuses to talk to him. She would ask him trivial questions about his day or inquire about the progress of her palace's preparations for an upcoming event. Each time, Zane's answers were thoughtful, and he would bow his head and return to his duties without hesitation. But Eryna found herself wanting to know more about his past, his thoughts, his life before he came to Thryxos. One evening, when the stars were particularly bright, Eryna invited Zane to walk with her in the palace gardens. It was an unusual request, and Zane was hesitant, unsure of why she would want the company of a lowly servant. But he didn't dare question her. He simply followed her as they strolled among the flowers, the soft glow of the moon casting a serene light over the scene. "I've been thinking about something," Eryna said after a long silence. Zane turned to her, waiting for her to continue. "Why did you come to Thryxos?" she asked. "You are from another world, yes? Why did they bring you here?" Zane hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "I was captured in a raid. My people, my world, didn't have the means to protect themselves. I was sold just like many others." Eryna stopped walking and turned to face him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You didn't deserve that." Zane looked at her, surprised by the sympathy in her voice. "Thank you, princess. But I've learned to accept my fate. I serve because it is what I must do." Eryna's heart ached for him. There was something in his eyes, a sadness that she had not seen before. She could not understand it fully, but she felt a strange pull toward him, a desire to protect him, to free him from the chains that bound him. But she knew it was impossible. A princess did not become involved with a servant, no matter how noble his heart. Yet, as the days passed, she found herself thinking of him constantly. When he wasn't around, she missed his presence, the quiet dignity he carried with him. It was as if his very being had seeped into her thoughts, refusing to let go. The turning point came during a dangerous diplomatic mission. Thryxos had received word of an imminent attack from a neighboring system, and the royal family was forced to make an urgent departure to secure the borders. Eryna's life was at risk, and she was to be escorted by a squadron of elite warriors. Zane, though a servant, was among the group tasked with protecting the princess. It was unusual, but his knowledge of the palace and his quick thinking in times of crisis made him invaluable. During the battle, as lasers crackled through the air and the sound of blaster fire echoed across the field, Zane shielded Eryna from an incoming blast, taking the brunt of it himself. He fell to the ground, wounded but alive, his body aching from the blast. The princess rushed to his side, panic rising in her chest. "Zane, no!" she cried, her hands trembling as she checked for his pulse. You can't die like this." Zane, though in pain, managed a weak smile. "I'm just a servant, princess. I'm doing what I was meant to do." But Eryna's eyes filled with tears, something inside her breaking. She had never realized how deeply she had come to care for him until that moment.